Welcome to the Mountain Adventure Film Festival. I'm Benjamin Oberman, and I'm extremely excited today to have world-class mountaineer, climber, business leader, Everest guide, and public speaker Adrian Ballinger. How are you, Adrian?
I am great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, God. It's hard to keep track of where in the world you are between South America and the Himalayas to the local mountains in Tahoe and Southern California.
Yeah.
Do you sometimes wonder where you are?
I do all the time. I always have my phone and my laptop, so I guess that's what makes home now. But today I actually am in Lake Tahoe, and I have just another 2 days here before heading to France on Friday for a month of skiing and ski mountaineering in the Alps.
That's incredible. Like, I'm so fascinated. Like, how you run a world-class guiding operation. You have your own climbing projects. You have a relationship and a life. How do you balance it all? Because I haven't figured out how to do that.
Well, I think a lot of people close to me would probably tell you I don't balance it very well. I love to be busy, of course. I love to have a lot of things going on, and I have a lot of different passions, which you can probably tell. I love being an athlete and being outside and climbing and skiing, but I also love the challenges of business. I founded Alpenglow Expeditions in 2004, and more I find myself being totally like driven and interested by this business and the people involved in it and how we get to offer more opportunities to climb and ski to more people. It's really fun. And then luckily I have an incredible partner in Emily Harrington that is also very busy, and we work hard each year to try to align our schedules so we have trip time and we prioritize that first and foremost before all the other things come into play.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, certainly another amazing woman, like the little kind of champions, indoor sport climber who's now climbed Mount Everest, worked at the first ascent of ski Makalu. She's free climbed El Capitan. She ice climbs. Like, talk about broadening your horizons.
Yeah, it's incredible, watching and being a part of Em's progression over the past 4 years. I'm totally inspired by her daily, which is cool, right? Like, we have so much fun as a couple, and we are a couple, but just separating myself from that and looking at her, the goals that she has and how hard she throws herself at them in places, way outside her comfort zone. I love to see it, and I'm glad I get to be a part of it. So she's actually coming to France with me, and this will be her first time ski mountaineering in a place called Le Grave. And Le Grave's really famous from Doug Coombs, was sort of the one to discover it as a skier. And it's this wild place where there's one single gondola that takes you up 7,000 vertical feet, drops you on top of this mountain, and then there's no avalanche control, no ski runs, no ski patrol, nothing. And a lot of like technical, interesting lines that sort of combine what we know from climbing, rope work, and things like that with some of the best skiing on the planet. It's pretty neat.
Wow. Now, when you go in there, are you using a touring package, or are you in a standard like resort alpine package with heavy boots, locked-in bindings?
A great question. A lot of the terrain is pretty serious, and so I do tend to ski it in more of an alpine setup. My boot still has a walk mode, and I use like a Mocker Duke, so I can go into touring mode if I need to, but it's heavy and not efficient at all. So I'd only be doing that really more for an emergency situation or something like that. That's my preference when I'm skiing a lot of that terrain. But then probably about 30% of the time we'll ride that lift, and then we'll go out on big tours into the bigger mountains that surround Le Grave. And so then I'd be more on my La Sportiva carbon skis and a lighter 4-buckle boot and, being able to move more efficiently. So both.
Yeah, on your advice, like I got set up in that lightweight carbon ski alpine, the 4-buckle La Sportiva. So I'm excited, but it is the question of like, how hard do I push it before I actually tear the bindings right off the ski and destroy the boot?
Totally. And I think that's something you'll discover over time. I'm a light guy. I only weigh 145 pounds, but I ski pretty hard, I think. And, I've had really good success. I do bring carbon skis and lightweight gear all the way onto peaks like Makalu and this upcoming spring on Everest. So I have a lot of faith in that gear and the trustworthiness of it.
Well, that's incredible. And now there's a difference. Like when I said, when I talked with Jeff Lowe in one conversation, I made the mistake of referring to mountaineering, and he was very clear that he is an alpinist.
Uh-huh.
Do you see yourself more as a mountaineer or as an alpinist?
Ooh, shoot, that's a great question. I would say today I consider myself more of a mountaineer. When I think of alpinism, I think of really light and fast ways of climbing, hopefully new or aggressive lines in the mountains. And, I've been lucky to spend a lot of time in my life doing that. I've done a lot of sort of climbing in that style down in Peru and also in Alaska and even in the Himalaya, trying new routes and things like that. But today, with my focus being more on the highest mountains of the world, so 8,000 meter peaks, and also having a focus on trying ski lines, those two things sort of necessitate oftentimes a heavier style, so that I can focus on things like skiing. And so I think there is sort of a shift from that cutting edge alpinism to what I would call more mountaineering.
Okay. And I do notice we do have some viewers with us. So at any point during our conversation, if you have a question, please type it in through the app that's available on YouTube, and we can get those questions answered. But speaking of Makalu, let's talk about the 2015 expedition. This was, first of all, this was your second expedition to ski Makalu. Let's start with what were the differences between the first and second expeditions?
Sure. So 2012 was the first time I went to the mountain, and I actually was guiding that season. So I have this incredible friend who's also a client, a really talented skier named Sergey from Russia. And he wanted to start skiing some of the biggest peaks in the world. He was already a former World Cup downhill skier, really great guy and a good friend. And so over a few years, we attempted to ski a number of the 8,000 meter peaks, and Makalu was one of them. But of course, when you go into a trip as a guide, the responsibilities are different. My sort of mitigation of risk and how much risk I'm willing to take might look different. And of course, my speed and how I climb a mountain feels different. So we had an incredible trip. We ended up getting to about 25,000 feet, and we skied from there. And it was fantastic, but we obviously didn't get higher on the mountain. And so since 2012, I'd sort of been dreaming about getting back. But when I really wanted to go back with a team of my peers, people who skied and climbed at my level or above my level, and that we could all push and support each other and see if we could accomplish this goal.
And so what was it, as you were putting this team together, was there much convincing involved, or was it simply like you called up, you said what was there, and they were like, I'm in?
Yeah, it was much more. It was much more the second. It's a small group of people doing these things that have both climbed really big mountains, 8,000 meter peaks, and also have sort of the ski ability and desire to push sort of that high end skiing. And skiing on these big mountains, as you can probably imagine, a lot of times we call it technical descending instead of skiing, at least in our brains, because it's not like you're skiing grape powder and having this huge amount of fun just ripping lines. It's a lot of survival skiing up on these peaks because there's so much wind and so much ice and so much hazard, and you're just suffering so much from the high altitude. So it's a small group of people that might be interested in doing this type of thing. And in this case, Emily Harrington was an obvious choice. She had climbed Everest. She was skiing at a really high level, and we wanted to do a big trip together. Hillary O'Neill and I had never done a trip together. She had done a number of things with Emily, and Hillary and I had always wanted to do something together. We were just trying to find the right thing. So she was on board right away. And then Jim Morrison is one of my best ski partners here in Tahoe, and had only more recently been exploring bigger mountains. He had been to the Himalaya with me 2 years earlier. And so same thing for him, the opportunity to get on a big mountain and take his ski ability to the biggest mountains in the world. It was a no-brainer. He was on board. And Kit Delorier was also with us, and Kit's a legend, and I was so excited to do a trip for the first time with her as well. Unfortunately, the trip and her health didn't work out. She had some altitude symptoms down low, actually at the end of the trek, and made the decision to pull off the mountain. I think it was the right decision, but we really missed her up there. I'm hoping we have the opportunity to ski together soon.
No, absolutely, and it's interesting. I wish. Hopefully we do have the chance to talk to Kit at some point, so it's kind of, as a lawyer would say, it's hearsay at this moment. It was kind of an interesting thing because both Kit and Hillary are now mothers.
Yes.
And I think that's a very interesting scenario for the general public who's never been in the mountains and thinks that men are ludicrous for going in there with kids, that it's a completely different factor. And did you ever have conversations about that, that as mothers going in and if there was a change in the risk or the confidence level or things that they were willing to undertake, knowing that they were?
We talked quite a bit about it, and I mean, I'm just amazed by both Hillary and Kit. And again, we talk about me juggling my life and the things I have in my life. Their juggling like makes mine looks like, you know, kids play. It's just amazing what they do to make a big trip like this happen, and also take care of their family and also have their professional lives. It's super inspiring. And but yes, they both do talk about how risk analysis and willingness to take risk changes. And I think you'll have to speak with them. But you know, I think it's not that they're not willing to take risk. Of course, they're still taking risk in these high-level adventures. But how often they're willing to do it certainly changes, and what's worth taking more risk and what isn't. I think those things shift as well. So yeah, they're interesting discussions to have for sure.
And you know, and Hillary, actually, her husband and is it her son or daughter that trekked with you guys all the way up to base camp? Is that correct?
Yes, well, husband and two sons both trekked to base camp, and I always knew Hillary was badass, but watching her, you know, she brought her family on one of the hardest treks I've ever done. Super remote. We trekked in August when the monsoon was still in full effect, so massive amounts of rain every day, leeches in unspeakable places on a daily basis. And, you know, for me and Emily, we were just trying to like survive the trek and get into high altitude where we feel much more comfortable. We were going really fast and pushing really hard. Hillary had to juggle that sort of like desire to get out of the leech zone and up into the mountains and to get started climbing, with the fact that she had her 8 and 10-year-old with her that needed to go on a much slower schedule based on acclimatization and things like that. And they had an incredible time. I had so much fun seeing like this mountain environment through the eyes of kids. It was awesome.
That's neat. Yeah, there's that innocence, and I can only imagine like what a life experience growing up. I mean, you know, coming back. So what did you do over your vacation? Oh, I went and trekked up to base camp with my mom.
Yeah, and I think it is really eye-opening as well. We are very lucky living in these different mountain towns. All of us live in mountain towns, and you know, our life is really pretty lucky in a lot of ways. And so, you know, to trek through a region that had been affected by the earthquake, that was very poor and really needed our tourism dollars. And then we had a team of Sherpa trekking with us who would work on the mountain with us. And so I think the kids' interaction with the Sherpa and the locals was really interesting. And it also, I found the locals were much more interested in us because of the fact that we had kids with us. It was sort of this way to interact more with the local villages. Yeah, pretty unique experience for them and us.
Well, cool. Well, we've got a question from Brooklyn. That's her name, not the city.
Oh, hi, Brooklyn.
Since both ways are more involved than just straight up or straight down, roughly how long did the Makalu trek take versus the ride back down? And which was more difficult?
All right. Well, so we didn't end up summiting, as many of you probably know. So we only made it to about 26,000 feet on the mountain, which leaves about 2,000 left above it. So that's good to know. And the progression of sort of climbing a big mountain like this, we trekked into base camp, which took about 9 days. And then we spent about, I would say, 25 days on the mountain going up and down, establishing camp, putting in camps, 4 camps on the mountain above base camp, putting in fixed lines, and then skiing down. On any of those trips, probably 90 to 95% of the time is climbing and suffering, and 5 to 10% is the actual skiing down. So the ratio is very heavily on the climbing side. Our final summit push was the same way. You know, it took us about 4 days to make it up to 26,000 feet, where we ultimately turned around because of an avalanche. And it took us probably, so 4 days up and then probably about 5 hours down, but that included a lot of stopping and a lot of like breaking down camps as we went down.
And in terms of Makalu, we don't hear as often or see the details like you do on Everest or K2. What would you say is the most technically difficult part of climbing and summiting Makalu?
Yeah, so Makalu is the 5th tallest mountain in the world, incredibly beautiful. It sits all by itself, and it's really known as a big black rock pyramid is how you see it from other mountains. So even finding a ski line on it is actually quite difficult, you know, where there is consistent snow. Of the part we climbed, which was from base camp to about 1,000 or 800 feet above Camp 4, the most difficult part was going from Camp 2 to Camp 3. And it's a section called you're going to a place called the Makalu at 25,000 feet. And the section's interesting because it's all between about 35 and 45 degrees of steepness with 3 rock bands cutting through this big snow face. And you're going from about 21,000 feet to 25,000 feet, so 4,000 vertical feet, and there's just no way you could possibly put a camp in. And moving 4,000 vertical feet in difficult snow conditions with heavy loads at those altitudes without supplemental oxygen is just incredibly difficult. So it was taking us between about 6 and 10 hours each time we did the move. And you know, hopefully you'll get a chance to see some of the video at some point. It's heartbreaking work, just breaking trail between knee and thigh deep snow. Really difficult work. The ski down is incredible.
And when you talk about a heavy load, just for reference, like how much weight was on your back when you were making these moves?
Yeah, it's actually much less than you would do at home. You know, I would say our packs were between 40 and maybe 55 pounds each time moving up. Quote unquote small as compared to like a huge Denali load or something like that, but really big for those altitudes.
Right. I mean, you know, would there be like an equivalent feel? Like, would it be like 100 pounds on your back down here at sea level?
Yeah, I would say, you know, definitely, you know, 80 or 90 pounds and just really, really difficult work. The other thing is we were the only team on the mountain this fall, and that's very unusual for an 8,000 meter peak. Usually 5 to 20 teams are combining to do the work of the mountain, to break trail, to keep the trail open, and maybe to put fixed lines in if you're using fixed lines. And in this case, we were four Western climbers with 4 Sherpa, 8 people on the entire mountain for the entire season. That was really fun in one way. It was a dream to have a mountain to ourselves like that, but it meant all the work of keeping the route open fell on just the 8 of us, and it was exhausting.
Well, we've got a question now from Travis. What is your process for choosing your next expedition, and what attracts you to a trip?
So I have a dream list of trips, Travis, right? It could keep me busy for the next 20 years. A few examples are, I haven't yet climbed and skied in Pakistan, so the big mountains of Pakistan are a huge dream. There's a ski line or a potential ski line on a mountain called Lhotse, the 4th tallest peak in the world, and it has this iconic couloir that might be the most aesthetic ski line on the planet, and it hasn't been skied yet. So I have these dream trips. And then it's just sort of figuring out what might fit in my schedule, whether I can find the funding to make the trip happen, are the partners that I'd like to do the trip with and that would like to do the trip with me, and just sort of playing and seeing how it fits together. So today, sitting at the beginning of 2016, I have a potential schedule of trips all the way out to the end of 2017. So I'm looking about, you know, 1.5 to 2 years out. And then things sort of drop and come together as it all works. But there's never a shortage of ideas.
Well, and you know, with that, let's talk about. I'd like to talk a little bit about the training of it, which you've climbed El Capitan, so you obviously are comfortable on rock. How much of being a great rock climber, a technical ice climber, you know, all these different things that, you know, an alpine skier, how much does that come into play with the training to be able to climb a big mountain?
I think the skills are actually really important. These sort of like background skills of climbing, ice climbing, skiing. On these big mountains, we're often not climbing the most technical terrain. So it's not like even the rock climbing we're doing, it doesn't look anything like Yosemite or El Cap, right? It might only be 5.2 or 5.4 in terms of difficulty. But most of that terrain, we're either soloing or simul climbing. So we have very low protection. So we need to be incredibly comfortable with our skills. And the same goes for skiing. You know, we might ski harder lines here in Squaw, more technical lines, steeper, you know, things like that. But here we're really comfortable and we have these great resources around us instead of being in the Himalaya where there's no rescue and we're much more tired and probably nauseous from the altitude. So we need our skills to be really, really strong to be able to handle the risks of the bigger mountains. So a big, big part of my day-to-day life when I'm home is rock climbing, ice climbing, and skiing, just making sure those skills are all at a high level. And then the second part of training is, of course, the cardio and endurance that go into being able to survive these trips. I probably lose 10 to 15% of my body weight on a big mountain, an 8,000 meter peak trip, just because we're burning 8 to 10,000 calories a day, and we're putting in probably 1 to 2,000 calories a day. So it's physically brutal just over time. And the more training we do at home, the more weight we put on at home, the more suffering we endure at home, the better prepared we'll be for that.
Yeah, and I remember following, like, you and Emily and Kit, and it seemed like, on a given week, like an average training run was like 20 to 30 miles through the mountains.
Yeah, we were trying to do, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but we were trying to do at least one big run like that a week. So a big run of 20 miles or more a week. And then we were doing 3 other days of running that might be in the sort of 6 to 12 mile length. So mileage wise, we were putting a bunch of miles in a week, and that was mixed with at least a couple of climbing days, rock climbing days every week leading up to the trip. We were also sleeping in hypoxic tents, which was sort of helping our bodies to build red blood cells. So sort of pre-acclimatizing our bodies to be able to endure while we were over there.
And you definitely have to have an understanding partner who doesn't start to think that you're the bubble boy.
Exactly right. Hopefully they want to share the hypoxic tent. And yeah, it is an interesting thing. I still get, my parents follow me on social media and on Strava and things like that. And so I still hear from them, it looks like all you did was play this week. You were out climbing and running and skiing and doing all these things. And I have to try to remind them that training is also work, right? There's no way I can attempt these big objectives safely without putting all that time in on the front end. So it is a job. Luckily, it's a really, really fun job.
Well, and that's something that I think is important to note with everything that you and Emily are doing, with every one of the athletes on our team, is to the outside public who is not trained, who is not experienced. They may make comments like, "That's crazy. It's an adrenaline junkie. It's it's a death wish," whatever it is. And people, what I want them to understand is that you're all some of the greatest athletes in the world who have dedicated yourselves, and with your experience and training, you've mitigated the risk where. I think Alex Honnold put it quite well in an interview recently with Mark Sinot, that what he does is not high risk, but it is high consequence.
Yes, I think that's right on. And I think a big part of what I think about, like, I do like the potential of risk because it focuses me, and it's what I love about big mountains is, like, there's this huge physical challenge, but there's also an emotional challenge in managing fear and all these different emotions that come out up there. And then there's the mental piece of how to mitigate risk and be effective and efficient and hopefully successful on these big mountains. And so I like the fact that potential risk is a part of our world and what we do. But being in a situation where I'm scared and I've done my calculus wrong and I misjudge the risk, I hate that feeling. And if I'm starting to get shots of adrenaline on these big mountains, then something's gone really wrong, right? So that's sort of where I feel I fit in this whole, am I an adrenaline junkie question.
Yeah, well, good. We've got a question from Faye. She says, so I have a few questions. Do you have a favorite expedition you've ever been on? What is your favorite part of an expedition? And where was your first expedition?
Wow. Okay, well, let's see. I'll start from what I would call my first expedition was when I was 17 years old. I had the opportunity to go and climb 20,000-foot volcanoes in Ecuador through a mentor of mine, Chris Warner, back on the East Coast. He ran a college program at Georgetown where I went to school. And it was this incredible 2-week trip. I climbed 3 20,000-foot peaks. I had the worst experience of my life on the first one and swore I'd never do it again. And then he persuaded me to stay. And the next 2, I started to see how cool this challenge and difficulty and suffering could be. So that was my first expedition. I was so lucky to go on it. It's still Ecuador, and these volcanoes that were my first, it's still the cornerstone of Alpenglow expeditions and where we train climbers. So I've been back to these volcanoes probably 50 times over the past 15 years. And I love them still. So that was the first. Favorite part of the expedition? It's everything all together, truthfully. it's the prep leading up to it and how much work goes into it, and then actually stepping on the plane and meeting the team and being together. And then, of course, the summit push is when all your hard work is sort of culminated. I enjoy standing on the summit, but it really is true that it's not about that for me. Like, usually when I'm standing on the summit, I'm so stressed about how much potential hazard there is and how much we need to get down that I often don't appreciate the summit until I'm back down in base camp, you know, hopefully having a shot at tequila and celebrating. And then I love that feeling afterwards. It's one of the only times I feel like I allow myself, whether we succeeded or failed, to finally like just go to the beach and hang out for a few days and not work out and not be training and not eat right. Like, I just love that feeling of like, I deserve this. I deserve this few days. And favorite expedition, it's always the one that's coming up next. You know, I'm so appreciative of the ones I've been on, but I just am so passionate about that next project that I get to be a part of. So in this case, that's this April, heading to Everest, the north side of Everest in Tibet, with Hillary O'Neill and Corey Richards. And we're all attempting to climb Everest without supplemental oxygen. So I've summited Everest 6 times before, all while guiding. And so I've always used oxygen to try to be as strong as possible and make the best decisions as possible. And this is my chance to sort of meet the mountain on purer terms and see if I'm capable to climb it without that oxygen.
Awesome. That's exciting. And just to wrap up today with Makalu, do you envision that there's going to be a 3rd expedition?
I am definitely dreaming of a 3rd expedition to Makalu. You know, it's funny. I've watched Meru, and it took those guys 3 tries. So I'm hoping the 3rd try is a charm. It's such an inspiring line, such a beautiful mountain. And this year's conditions definitely showed me that it is possible to climb the mountain and ski it from the summit. We didn't quite hit those conditions, but they can and do exist on the mountain. And so I'm totally dreaming of a return.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow Adrian. You can check out his athlete page on filmfestivalflix.com, part of the Mountain Adventure Film Festival, where you can keep up with his social feeds, his website, his blogs, everything that's going to come. I know we're working on some content and some films that hopefully we'll be seeing next year. And if you've missed this interview, it'll be in the next couple days. It'll be cut and posted on Facebook, so you can continue to ask questions in the comment box. And when possible, Adrian will watch it. And you know, being that the Mountain Film Festival is, you know, you can watch these films anywhere in the world. Possibly when you guys are up on Everest, you'll be in a snow cave at 8,000 meters watching on your satellite phone.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks so much for being a part of it, Adrian.
All right. Thanks, Benjamin.